Very good afternoon to all the delegates. Hope you all had a very good sessions in the morning. And now we are into the session 10 of this ESTTP. And today's expert speaker, Dr. Akash Chaurasia, sir. He is an assistant professor in Department of Pharmacy, BITS Pilani on Hyderabad campus. Sir is pleased to deliver a topic on regulatory considerations for development and filling of a new drug product. So very nice to have you on this platform of ESTTP organized by South Hills College of Pharmacy, and pleasure inviting you from SHCPT. And to do the honorary read of a bio, I request my colleague Mrs. Shivakami Madam to do the read. Madam, kindly proceed with the reads.
Ma'am, please unmute yourself. Shivagami, ma'am.
Okay. One. Me in College of in the Department of Pharmaceutical Analysis. I take the privilege to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Akash Chaurasia. Dr. Akash Chaurasia is an experienced formulation scientist with work experience in R&D division of pharmaceutical companies like Dabur Research Formulation, Reddy's Laboratories, and Amneal Pharmaceuticals. During this tenure, he primarily worked to formulate development of dosage form, including complex products like liposoluble suspensions.
Shivagami Madam, you are not audible.
Was part of innovative research work in the of his international book and national and international. Thank. I would like to end.
Hello.
And Madam, you can take this. You can take
some network issues. Suchrita ma'am, just continue.
Yeah, I'll take over the session, and sorry sir for there is a technical glitches, and I'll take this opportunity to introduce our today's chief guest, that is today's expert speaker, sorry, Dr. Akash Chaurasia, sir. Shivagami Madam, kindly mute. I'll take this opportunity to introduce today's expert speaker, Dr. Akash Chaurasia, sir. Sir is an experienced formulation scientist with experience in R&D division of various pharmaceutical companies like Dabur Research Foundation and Dr. Reddy's Laboratories and Amneal Pharmaceuticals. During his tenure, he primarily worked for formulation development of injectable dosage forms, including complex products like liposomes, nano suspensions, lyophilized product, etc. Especially his expertise to regulatory considerations for the US and European Union, etc. Presently, Dr. Chaurasia sir is working as assistant professor in Department of Pharmacy, BITS Pilani, Hyderabad campus. During the extensive research experience, Dr. Chaurasia was the part of innovative research work, which is clearly depicts in the form of his publications, in the form of international patent applications, research articles, book chapters, and national international conference procedures. Pleasure to have you on this platform, sir. And based on your expertise gained till now, Dr. Chaurasia's research group is working in the areas like development of complex formulations, especially liposomes, nanoparticles, suspensions for the effective delivery of biomolecules, development of a stable delivery system utilizing techniques like lyophilization, and development of a different products-based approaches. So, with a short note of an intro, I take this opportunity to have you here, sir, and over to you. Kindly share your presentations and give your valuable advice to all the faculty members in the regulatory area. Thank you so much.
So thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Sharida ma'am, for such a nice intro. It was not a short, I believe it was a very detailed intro. Whatever I've done so far in the past, I was just going through while listening to everything. Okay, so anyways, thank you everyone. So Good afternoon, all. I believe all of you had a very nice lunch. Post-lunch sessions are normally not very good for the audience, actually. It has been found many times for me also, and it's not different from you guys. Actually. Okay, so but I'll try to make it more interactive as much as possible, and maybe I will try that you maybe learn something out of this particular session. Okay. So that is why when I was in discussion with Dr. Sucharita regarding the topic, so we thought of why not we'll have something on the regulatory part so that it will be good for the audience to drug development, research, everything is fine. Like you can find n number of discussions and literature on that part, but very few discussions are there then on how normally drug development and approval process takes place and what are the various modes of pharmaceutical product filing and all. So you might have learned, you might have read about some of these things, but possibly after the discussion, you would be having a better idea on this particular topic. So with this note, I would like to start my discussion. Okay. I believe I am audible enough for all of you.
Perfectly, sir. You're audible. Kindly share
Okay.
your presentation, sir. We'll
Thank
check the
you.
visibility.
Can you see?
Yes, sir.
So the topic for today's discussion is regulatory consideration for development and filing of new pharmaceutical products. So before moving to, I thought of giving my background, but already Dr. Sucharita has discussed everything, so I will skip it out. Okay. I worked in some of the pharmaceutical companies, and currently I'm working at in BITS Plani Department of Pharmacy. This is my first role as an academic researcher. Okay. Previously, I worked with a pharmaceutical company for almost 8 to 10 years. I was in various companies, and the only common thing was I was in the formulation development department. I worked on formulation development of injectable products, or various type of products, normal products and complex products. So that was all about me. So now we'll come into the real business for which we are here. So in today's discussion, we will be going through the various topics. So I will try to make it in a inclined manner. So first of all, we'll learn what is regulatory. We'll understand what is regulatory affairs. Then various global regulatory bodies. I will try to have a brief overview on that, and then we'll move into the drug discovery and development process, how that activities take place, and then I will move into the second part of our discussion, that is the filing process. I believe some of you are already aware of some of the things, so please bear with us. Okay, this presentation is meant for everyone, so that everybody should be on the same platform. So if anything which you already know, it will be really nice that it will be a quick revision for you guys. So coming to the regulatory affairs, that okay, the first important question whenever I will start this type of discussion with the students or with the audience, I will start with this slide only, that regulations in pharmaceutical industry. So basically, when we see like pharmaceutical industry is one of the most regulated industry. But why there is a need for such high regulations in the pharmaceutical industry? If we look into the various industries, whether it's a food industry or it's a FMCG or then other industries which are non-consumer products and all. But pharmaceutical industry is one of the regulated one. And the reason is very simple. Like pharmaceutical industry deals with the maintenance and care of life. That is why it is one of the highest regulated agencies. That is why whatever is the reason, suppose if the drug is not there in the market and the pandemic situation is there, but until or unless the drug product should be having the required quality, it is of no use. Okay, so that is why instead of creating the desired therapeutic response, the drug with the undesired quality can lead to some other serious effects out of it. So at the end of the day, whatever the medication we have to give to the patient that is meant to save the life of a patient or to cure the patient, it should be having the required level of quality into it, and that is why the pharmaceutical industry is the most regulated. Now the question is, since when these regulations came into picture, when we realized that there is a need for a pharmaceutical regulations in a pharmaceutical industry. So the answer for that question is, there are many stories, many incidents, basically real incidents, that turn out to be a milestone in creating the high regulations in the pharmaceutical industry. And just to discuss that particular thing, there is one of the major incident which happens in USA. USA is a country which is very, very particular about their regulations. Pharmaceutical industry nowadays. Everybody might have heard about USFDA. Many regulatory agencies try to learn from USFDA, and that is not wrong also because they are one of the best regulatory agency in the world. So, but the situation which the USFDA right now, it was not like this 80 years back. The regulations were not that much stringent. Okay, there was a very small division called Bureau of Chemistry, which was formulated in 1906, and they were responsible for maintaining a superficial way of doing the regulation in pharmaceutical. Right? I will not say regulation, just they were the watchdog and all. They will just look into the thing whether everything is going on right or not. In 1937, there was one product called sulfanilamide elixir. So it got an approval, and this company started the marketing of this particular product. And what happened in 1937 is, after the administration of this particular product, more than 100 people died in US who take this product actually. Because if you look into the developed countries, they are very, very particular about how people are dying. Okay, it is not something like they just leave it in the other cases. So in US, it was a big thing that more than 100 people were died because of that particular drug. So some investigation was made into it. And after the investigation, it was found that sulfanilamide was comprised of the diethylene glycol and water. And after investigation, it was found that this diethylene glycol was found to be highly toxic material. And since at the time of drug product approval, filing and approval process, the sponsors are not supposed to do a lot of toxicity studies. So this product was approved, and after the approval, it caused effect also. And it was also observed that it was given a tag of elixir, and we all know what is elixir is. And if you look into the composition of this particular product, it is not having a composition of an elixir. So those are the other things, like labeling misinformation was also there. So finally, after the investigation, it was found that there is a strong need to control the drug product development and approval process. Otherwise, these type of incidents will keep on happening. So with this particular thought process, USA basically came out with one act, basically Drug and Cosmetic Act. Okay? And with the virtue of that act, basically they came out with USFDA. And that is how USFDA was created and empowered in 1938. And that is why the Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act in USFDA was created in 1938 after this incident, which happened in 1937. And that is why whenever we look into this FDC Act, we say FDC Act of 1938. And that is why that could be one of the reasons. I'm not very sure that in India also this Food and Cosmetic Act basically came in 1940, just after this, possibly after this incident only. But in US, it has happened because of this reason. And with this act, basically, USFDA was empowered. First of all, it was created and empowered to look into the various paths of new product development and approval process. And this act also allows the manufacturer to disclose all the information related to the composition, manufacturing processes, and safety and efficacy of the product on the human beings. So things were changed drastically after this particular event, and that is why this is one of the important events in the pharmaceutical industry. And later on, once this act was created, obviously with the occurrence of other activities over a period of years, basically, more and more amendments were added into this, and that is how USFDA, which is there in the current form in front of us, is because of those amendments, those incidents actually. That is, Kefauver-Harris Amendment of 1962 also played a very, very important role in strengthening the laws which are associated with the drug regulatory agencies. Now, the important question would be, maybe some of you are already aware of what is regulatory affairs, but yes, still, as I told at the beginning only, that we need to bring everybody on the same page. So what is regulatory affairs? So regulatory affairs basically comprise of two things. First is the regulatory agency, and second is the regulatory bodies. Okay, so regulatory department. So these two people, regulatory agencies and the regulatory department in a pharmaceutical industry, both of them are responsible to take care of all the activities which are needed in the regulatory affairs. What is needed in the regulatory affairs? The regulations which would be required for the drug during the drug development process, the requirement with respect to the understanding the safety and efficacy of a pharmaceutical product, So all those activities are supposed to be in a purview of certain regulations, and that regulations are possibly performed by the sponsor properly or not. These things are basically taken care by two people. First is the regulatory affairs department within an organization, and second is the regulatory of agencies basically. So after that everything is done and it is submitted to the regulatory agencies, then again they will evaluate or everything. If they have any concern, they need to reach out to the regulatory affairs team actually. So these are the two different stakeholders, major stakeholders, which are responsible for ensuring the regulations are following properly or not. So regulatory agency is the competent government agency which is responsible for ensuring that medicines are safe and effective as per the acceptance criteria. And regulatory affairs is a scientifically driven department. They are not the police actually, they are scientific police, we can say. Okay. So they are scientifically driven department responsible for obtaining marketing approval of new drug product and maintaining post-approval requirement. That is always made. Okay. It acts as an interface between a project team within an organization and regulatory agencies. Who? Regulatory Affairs Department. The Regulatory Affairs Department acts as a single point of contact for a regulatory agencies. If regulatory agencies have any concern from the pharmaceutical product, from the regulations pre or post approval or during the approval process, they are going to reach out to the Regulatory Affairs Department. And within an organization also, if anybody has any concern with the regulatory agencies, they need to reach out to the Regulatory Affairs Department, and that Regulatory Affairs Department will be communicating with the regulatory agency. This is what the role of a Regulatory Affairs Department in any pharmaceutical industry. So if we look into the structure of any organization, so what we can find is the multiple departments which function together. When we say R&D, so what is R&D? R&D is basically, R&D is a very, very broad term actually. If I say that I am working in an R&D, it is not a correct term actually. I should be saying like I am working in a FR&D, formulation development R&D. I am a formulator. If I am working as an analytical scientist, I will be analytical scientist. I am working in ARD. If I am working in the bioequivalence division, I would be a clinical researcher. So this is what the R&D comprises of the various departments. Same is the case with the manufacturing facility also. So manufacturing facilities having various divisions. It could be having a production, the people who are working on the floor who are really manufacturing. There could be another division called quality control who will be testing. Quality assurance department who will be making sure that the quality has been followed actually. Okay. And then there's the purchase department also, that is also called a supply chain management department, SCM. So it may be comprised of the technical people from right now. A lot of pharmaceutical graduates are going into the supply chain because to some level of scientific and management skills are needed in this department. There is a good growth perspective in this department also. So that is how pharmaceutical industry is scattered, or we can say like various divisions function together for a common goal. What is the common goal? If the company is a new product development company, then their common goal is to get an approval of an NCE. And if your company is a generic company, their objective is to get to do the development and approval of a generic product. For that common goal, all these functions basically, all these departments basically function together. Now, during their functioning, obviously they will be doing their job. Formulation team will be making their developing the formulation. Supply chain will be helping in finding out the right vendor who can provide all the raw materials and the packaging material. Clinical research will be doing the bioequivalence studies. So obviously these departments will be doing their own function. And those functions, the data which are generated during these activities, these data are supposed to be submitted to the regulatory agencies. Okay, so what regulatory affairs do in that case? Because all the functions are done by their specialist department only. So regulatory affairs people, they basically collect all the information together. They convert that particular information into a specific format. That format is called as a dossier, and that format is prepared in line with the common technical document, that is CTD. I will not be going into CTD thing and all, but yeah, it is as per the, maybe some of you might have heard about CTD. So they prepare all the information in a common format. Okay. That format is basically a dossier. That dossier is basically submitted to a regulatory agency. So that is what the role of a regulatory affairs department. So they act as an interface among all the divisions who are functioning. I'll try to come up with the majority of the departments which are there, but maybe in pharmaceutical industry, each and every industries are free enough to give the nomenclature to their department basically, but these are the generic names which are always there. Okay? So this department function together to do the required development, product development and filing of the product with the regulatory agency. Who are the regulatory agencies? For each nation is having their own regulatory agency. US is having US FDA, India is having CDSCO, Europe is in the Europe basically, since they all are under the some agreement. So more than 30 countries basically comes under the purview of EMA, European Medicine Agency. For UK there is a separate agency which is called MHRA. And apart from this, each of the European countries itself are having their own regulatory agencies also. For example, for Germany, there is a separate agency. For France, there is a separate agency. So that is how, and commonly there is also EMA. Maybe at the end of the discussion, once we'll go into the EMA, then I will discuss the things in more detail. For the Canada, there is Health Canada. For the Australia, there is a TGA. And for Brazil, there is a ANVISA. So maybe you might have heard about some news which was floating a couple of weeks before that Brazil has denied the Brazil agencies are having some observations with Covaxin manufacturers and all, Bharat Biotech thing. Some serious GMP issues were observed. Some of this news was floating. I doesn't know the detail of that news, but the thing is, ANVISA is the department basically who came out with all those observations. So ANVISA is for the Brazil. So now the thing is, we went across all different type of regulatory agencies and the regulatory affairs departments. Now there may be one question which may be probably not now, maybe later on also with many of you, that how these regulatory bodies are different, like regulatory agencies are different. Like if we say that US FDA is one of the best agency, I am saying like, or this particular agency is not having the complete more stringent thing and all. So what is the basic difference? How because all of them are doing the same job, all of them are involved in the regulations of a pharmaceutical product. So how they are different? So there are certain features I try to categorize, like how these agencies are different. So first thing is how they are regulating the pharmaceutical, their laws and enforcement of the laws, how they are stringent to the things, how they are proactive in their activities and all those types of stuff. Different guidelines for the registering a drug actually. So there are, for example, US FDA is very clear about their guidelines that there is for new drug approval, there is a process called NDA. For generic product approval, there is a process called ANDA. Then there are supplemental product approval also. For that, there is a process called supplemental NDA. So they are very clear about. So there are various guidelines and all. Requirement to maintain the registration post approval. What are the things which would be needed? Then registration fees, like with the good regulatory agencies, if you see, they charge a huge fees also. It is not free actually. And the patent regulation of the particular country also, that will also play a very important role. Apart from this, there are some other minor things also, like proactiveness of any organization. For example, US FDA is very, very keen toward avoiding the shortage of the drug. So they have a very good projections on what is going to happen in the future. Accordingly, they basically have all the information they are having, like universe of the manufacturing facilities. They are having all the data in the database. All the information is that this particular product, for example, if we say like remdesivir for injection. So with them, they are having all the information that across the globe, how many facilities can manufacture this particular product in reality, not for the newspapers and all. In reality, how many can? So those type of proactiveness or projections are there with USFDA. And drug shortage is one of their important agenda on which they always work, not during this COVID time. In the previously also, they are very, very keen toward maintaining the drug supplies to the needy person. So that is also one of the minor thing I just forgot to put it here. So now the thing is, we have gone through the various regulatory agencies and how they are different. So based on this difference, so globally, pharmaceutical industries, they have segregated the regulatory agencies in the various types. One of the important types, which normally, if the people who will be going to industry, So one of the normal categorization is they call one particular sector as a regulated market, or we can say highly regulated market. And another particular sector, they call it as an emerging market. So regulated market, there are the countries who, or the regulatory bodies who are very, very keen toward the regulation, who are a direct member of ICH also. So ICH is International Conference on Harmonization. So there are three major parties of ICH: USA, Europe, and Japan. So who are the direct member of ICH basically, because they are very keen toward the quality part. So they comes under this regulated market. Okay. Emerging market are basically the regulatory agencies or the countries who are now progressing toward moving into the regulations. I will not say high regulations because that will be the wrong term for now, but they are now moving towards putting up the regulations, and they become sensitive towards having a good regulations. At least I'm not saying high regulation, because high regulations comes with a cost also. That is why the cost of the medications are very high in these regulated markets. So but the minimum level of regulation, that is good regulation. So that is how these countries are now moving into, and they are also now a target for the pharmaceutical industries to look upon these particular sectors also. So the reason for this segregation is many of the pharmaceutical, like almost all the pharmaceutical companies, have segregated their businesses based on their based on the regulations. The reason for that segregation is it will be clear for the pharmaceutical manufacturer or sponsor to do the necessary studies, because highly regulated agencies would be needing some specific set of data. Emerging market would be not needing that specific set of data. They would be needing a certain set of data. So that is why they try to have this segregation so that they can develop the product. For the regulated market, they develop the product in a different way. For the emerging market, they need to develop a product in a different way, because at the time of development, lot of documentations are supposed to be prepared. So a lot of stuff like specifications, STPs or COAs. So basically all the or any type of protocols. So while doing all those type of activities, it is important to understand for which market we are working actually. So accordingly, the specifications can be drafted, the requirements can come across. So this was a brief idea about the drug regulatory affairs and the various regulatory agencies. Now we'll move into the next phase of our discussion, that is the drug discovery and development process. So in this particular part, we will go through that how basically new chemical entity. Please do not consider the things going on right now because of this COVID thing, because right now everything is done on the basis of emergency approval process. Okay, like that is why we are getting the vaccine approval in 1 year, for drug product approval in 6 months, or any other product in 1 year. So that is because of the special condition, pandemic situation, and based on the benefit risk ratio, regulatory agencies are giving an approval, and other stuffs are also going on in parallel, like rollover evaluation is also going on. But normally, in the normal scenario, forget about this, pre-2019, the normal scenario for drug development and approval process is like it has to go across the various phases, from the discovery phase to the preclinical phase to the clinical phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then the application is submitted, and after the submission, the regulatory agencies review that application. They again take 6 months to 1 year of time at least. Okay, and then the approval of the product is coming out. So the entire process basically takes place in an average of 7 to 14 years. This is the time duration for the development and approval process for a new product. Okay, apart from this, huge amount of money is also invested from this type of companies actually who are working on new. I'm not talking about the generic product. Okay, so this discussion is for the new pharmaceutical product, the NDAs. Okay, so in those particular cases, like the R&D cost only for this type of products is estimated to be somewhere around $1 billion. That is equivalent to 7,000 to 7,500 crore or something, whatever the exchange price is for today actually. Okay, so at that time when I prepared this PPT, so it was 70 rupees, so it was 7,000 crore. Okay, so approximately this much. It requires close interaction of large number of scientific disciplines for many years, because various teams are working together, whether it's a discovery or it's a preclinical or it's a clinical. So various teams are, we'll go through all the team members. So you can understand that how many stakeholders are there. So close interaction, good teamwork are needed in this type of product development, in this type of product success. Recently, like 1 or 2 months back only, one of the product which was developed in Hyderabad only, it got an approval as an NCA. It is a NIP, it's a tyrosine kinase inhibitor. So systematic planning and teamwork is required to achieve a common goal, and various teams, including the cross-functional departments, which are having different functions like analytical department, formulation department, regulatory, IPR. So they are the cross-functional departments. So they are employed and integrated at a different stages. So various teams which are responsible for this drug discovery and development process, as I told, discovery team, preclinical team, and clinical team. If you would like to see that how the entire development process takes place in a single shot, so I tried to make one flow chart in which it can be explained in possibly in a better manner. So how the thing started is, first of all, the drug discovery phase, basically we are a pharmacologist and a chemist, only two people. Okay, these two sit together and basically do the magic. They came out with the various molecules which possibly can work upon how those molecules will be coming, that we'll discuss in the next slide only. Okay, so this chemist and pharmacologist, they work together. They test the biological activity of the product using some in vitro tools possibly, and if the product was found to be showing the required efficacy and all, then the things will move into the next level, that is the preclinical testing, in which the testing will be done for the proper formulation of that particular product on the animals. Now the question is, why the testing is needed to be done on the animals? The reason for that is to understand the safety of that particular product. Before testing into, finally the product has to be tested into the humans. It has to be used for the humans. Why we are doing on the animals? Just to make sure it is not going to be toxic for the humans. So that is why preclinical testing is more oriented toward the safety part. Okay. So in this preclinical testing, when the product which has been the drug substance which has been identified. Okay, so from now onwards I will say drug substance for the API, active pharmaceutical ingredient. We also call it as a salt, and drug product for a formulation, DS and DP. Okay, so please make a note of that. So once this DS is identified, drug substance is identified, that drug substance is basically converted into a DP, that is a drug product, through the formulation strategy. So formulation team basically comes over here and take up the responsibility. Chemical team basically they try to develop that particular DS drug substance at the higher volumes. Okay? So basically they start doing the synthesis at the higher levels and the scale up of the things. And once this API is ready and the formulation is ready, they were basically tested on the animals. They started testing on the animals. This entire activity takes place within a period of many years actually. Once the enough data is generated on the animals, especially with respect to the safety, with respect to the toxicity of that particular product or the formulation, then the next job is to test on the humans. But before moving into for the testing on the humans, basically, I'm talking this process for the USFDA, because USFDA is very, very particular about the entire process. So once this testing is has to be done on the humans, and in animal testing everything is fine. The product is found to be effective, the product is found to be safe. Now the next objective is for the testing on the humans. So before testing on the humans, basically, there is a need to file an application that is called as IND, Investigational New Drug. Investigational New Drug applications are submitted for testing that particular test material on the humans. Okay. So in this IND application, all the safety efficacy data which is generated, the manufacturing information, and the the clinical protocol, that how the clinical study has to be done. So IND application is having three major components. First is the safety and pharmacology of safety and efficacy data on the animals. Second is the manufacturing information. And third one is the clinical protocols, that how the study has to be done on the humans actually. So with these three information, the IND application is submitted to the FDA. FDA basically go through this application, and within 30 days they need to respond. So in 30 days, if FDA doesn't respond, it means there is no concern from the FDA and we can move ahead for the clinical study. Second option would be FDA will say, okay, go ahead, you are fine. In that also we have to go ahead. Third case is FDA feels like that data is not good enough to demonstrate the safety of a product, or the manufacturer is not having a proper readiness for the manufacturing of that particular product. In any of the case, they can put up a clinical hold. Clinical hold means they will be coming up with some revision, major revision into the IND application. Major revision means they will ask to do some more studies. And once those studies are done, then only the sponsors are supposed to do the clinical study. Now the question is, clinical hold is a one-time activity or it is continuous? So the answer is clinical hold is basically is not a one-time activity. During the clinical study, again, because clinical studies are supposed to be done over a period of years. So every year the sponsor has to provide the update on the clinical study in the form of IND only to the regulatory agencies. And regulatory agencies can put clinical hold at any stage of the clinical study, at the beginning and during the study also, if they find any type of suspicion or any type of issue with the safety of that particular. So that is what the application of a clinical is. Okay. So now once the IND is approved, there is no objection from the FDA, clinical studies are started. So clinical studies are basically divided into three parts: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 4 is there, but it is after an approval. Okay. So in the phase 1 is basically meant for the safety studies. To understand the safety, it is done on the small amount of volunteers. Then phase 2 is basically safety along with the safety tolerance and the efficacy part on a moderate number of volunteers. And then the phase 3, it is more of a efficacy part, and that has to be done on the large number of volunteers. So this process again will take good amount of time. So if you calculate like pre-clinical testing, I mentioned 4+ years, clinical testing 6+ years. So approximately it is 10+ years, but everything is done in the current scenario within a year during this Corona time, COVID time. So that is why I told you that keep that as an exception, because there are other regulatory options are there in case of this type of pandemic or emergency situation. So the industries are basically doing the things in line with some exceptional regulatory requirement. That is why those things are going within a year or 6 months now. Okay, so in the normal scenario, this is basically the way. So once these clinical studies are done, everything is compiled into a form of a dossier, as I told you. Okay, that CTD thing, common technical document. So in the form of a dossier, it is submitted to the FDA. FDA review the application. Again, FDA is not going to review like in the current time where FDA has given an approval within 10 days to the vaccine. No, normally FDA give an approval from 6 months to 10 months of time, or even more also. That is the normal time for FDA to give an approval. Okay. So during this approval process, the review process, FDA basically review that particular application. That application is reviewed by the various experts. So clinical expert will be reviewing the clinical part. For manufacturing expert will be reviewing the chemistry part. So that is how the statistical expert will be reviewing the statistical part. So all the different part of the applications are reviewed by the different expert, and accordingly they will come out with their decisions. So what are the decisions? There are 3 decisions. First is the disapproval. Like they will find that, okay, this data is not good enough for giving an approval. So it is rejected in one sense, or some major revisions are suggested. Second is the conditional approval. So some minor corrections are supposed to be done and the sponsor can take an approval immediately. And third one is the clear-cut approval, like the sponsors or the applicant can market the product immediately after getting an approval. And once the approval is obtained, the product is launched into a market and it is available for the patients. So during this, after this launch process, basically the phase 4 activities, we can say surveillance activities can also be called as, and sometimes if the sponsor or anybody else is doing some modification in the existing product. For example, if suppose I am a sponsor and I launched a product for the treatment of cancer, for the treatment of lung cancer, I got an approval. Now I feel like this particular molecule can also be tested for the treatment of breast cancer. So what I will do is I will move into the phase 4 study, and I already got an approval for lung cancer. So during the phase 4 study, I will be testing the same formulation for the breast cancer, and and then again I will be submitting an additional application, which can also be called as a supplemental NDA application. And if FDA find it suitable for the application in the treatment of that particular disease, that is breast cancer, so my product will be given one more indication in the package inside, that is the breast cancer. So that is what the phase 4 studies are normally used for. And apart from this, obviously pharmacovigilance studies can also be clubbed together. That basically comes under this post-approval phase. Now, whatever we have discussed so far, if I try to segregate that discussion, the pace is fine. Like I'm going faster, slower, or something. If anybody can give me a quick.
No, sir, it was perfectly all right.
Okay, fine. Thank you. I have some comments also. Okay, fine. So you can, if any one of you is having any concern in between, you can post on the comments. I'll try to read the comments if time permits. Anyway, so whatever we have discussed so far, like various stages, so we will go through all the stages one by one, and who are the various team members who work together. So discovery phase, basically, so in the discovery phase, as I told earlier only, that in the discovery phase, we'll try to identify the molecule which can have an efficacy. So who is needed at this particular phase primarily is the chemist, basically. So who will be the backbone of the entire development? So chemists will be needed, and they will be doing the entire study on identifying the molecule. So normally, before starting this particular activity, the pharmaceutical companies are having some objective, like because based on their preference, based on their expertise, they try to work on a specific division. Like one unit will be there for the cancer product development or for the cardiovascular development, and all. So that is how they basically proceed for the discovery phase or the development of a new product. And the development of a new product basically lies on the various rationales. Actually. First is if there is some new research finding, they would be having an interest on moving into that. Then if there is any unmet medical need, very good example is in front of us right now, COVID vaccines, or right now we will be getting one more molecule, molnupiravir. Actually, it is going to be there very soon. That maybe that is an oral product, and very soon it will be there for the treatment of the COVID patients with the 5 dose of tablets. Actually, within 5 days the patient will be recovered. And some more specific molecules are also under development by the Pfizer. Actually, they are working on they are working on 2 antiviral products. One is for the infusion, and another one is again for the oral route. Actually, so they are the specific. Till now, whatever the molecules we got so far for the COVID treatment, I'm going a little bit off track, but yeah, it will take only 1 minute. So whatever the molecules they are right now, they all are the repurposed drug actually. Okay, including this molnupiravir also. This molnupiravir also was developed around 20 years back only. Okay. So these are all repurposed drugs which were already there for some other treatment, but now they are used for the purpose. These 2 new molecules which are developed, which are under development by Pfizer. One is they are the new molecules which were recently they started the development actually. And they are very, very specific for this virus. So if you get an approval by end of the year, possibly it's one of them, it will be a good message, message to everyone, and good thing for everyone actually. So that is what unmet medical need. Unmet medical need. They found that okay, for this particular disease there is no drug, so we will be developing this particular. And based on marketing surveys also, like for example, many times it happens that okay, for this particular disease, the drugs which are used, which are not very specific. So there is a need to develop some targeted or specific drugs, like for example, antibodies, so that it can be more useful for the treatment with a minimum side effects. So there could be many reasons for working on the new drug product. But the primary objective of this drug discovery team is the identification of lead compound, that which this particular compound is going to work. So how they will do? They basically do through the various activities. I believe the theme of the entire discussion of this particular STT program is one of that way only. Okay, so that we are going to discuss that how drug discovery can be done. So there are various ways by which drug discovery can be done. First is the random screening. In the random screening, basically the organizations or the companies who would like to work, they can take a compound from the libraries, chemical libraries they are having, or based on their past experiences. Then the targeted synthesis. Targeted synthesis means there is some basic nucleus and which is found to be effective, but the molecule which are already available for that, possibly it is having some side effects, or some resistance is developed, especially in case of antibiotics we can find. So in those particular cases also we can develop new molecules. We can develop new molecules based on what is the structure of the receptors which are there for which the drug has to be there, interact, and based on some existing information on some basic target nucleus if we are having an all. Next one is the combinatorial chemistry, in which one compound is used as the base chemical and various functional groups. So that is what nucleus case is. And drug modeling. So drug modeling is what the theme of the discussion is. So using some software or something. So normally what happens is, it is not something like there is a rule that we can select either of the technique, or being a chemist, we have to select either of the technique. I think many of you are the chemist only. So being a chemist, the idea is basically you can adopt these strategies together also. The idea is to get a lead compound. The idea is not to stick to the rules and regulation of, because there is no rules and regulation in the science sector. The only thing is everything has to be in the scientific domain. And the idea is to get a lead compound, the effective lead compound. So if these techniques can be used in combinations, that is also very, very useful and effective. So now, once these molecules are identified, the chemist will do the synthesis of these molecules, and pharmacologists will evaluate the efficacy of that particular product using the various tools, that is the in vitro or in vivo tools. In vitro tools could be the cell line tools and all, and maybe if needed in vivo tools also. But normally at this particular stage, the sponsor normally prefer to use the in vitro tools because they are easy to handle and the results can also become much faster. So once this lead compound is identified, we can also call it as a preliminary phase also. Preliminary phase in the drug discovery stage. So once the lead compound is identified, other team members are also added. Then this chemist and pharmacologist will say, okay, we found the molecule. There are 3-4 molecules which are showing the good efficacy. Now there is a need for some more team members to do a proper screen. So who are these team members? Obviously, chemist and pharmacologist are already there. We need an analytical chemist to do the required analysis. We need a pharmacokinetic scientist who can do the PK study if needed on the suitable animal model, and the toxicologist who can do some toxicology assessment, and then the formulation scientist who can develop some pre-formulation. Now maybe some of you can ask the question that why we need to do the PK study and toxicity studies right now, because everything has to be done in the preclinical phase also. The answer for that question is possibly right now. The first thing is the intensity at which we have to do the study is not that much high as we need to do in the preclinical studies. Second thing is discovery study can be done in the non-GLP environment, but the preclinical activities are supposed to be done in a GLP environment. So we need to follow the good laboratory practices. Good laboratory practices means all the regulations will be coming. Where if we have to submit any data during the preclinical studies, that has to be looked upon from the many perspective, from the GLP perspective, from the regulatory perspective. So that is why doing the study in the preclinical phase is more time consuming, more expensive. So just to make sure that whether for the sponsor that we have to go for the preclinical GLP based studies, to take that decision, it is also important to do some preliminary study at the discovery phase itself, so that to minimize the surprises. Because surprises cannot be avoided. Okay, if they are avoided, they are not surprises anymore. So to minimize the surprises, so that is why some of the preliminary studies are needed at this particular stage. And then these divisions basically work together. They come out with their results and all, and these it is basically an iterative process. Like they come out with the molecule, they do the study. If any issue is found with respect to toxicity or efficacy, again the changes are supposed to be done on the molecule or on the formulation. Again, it has to be tested. So it's a iterative process. It is a continuous process. And once they reach to some positive outcome of the entire work, then this drug discovery team basically submit the report to the management, and then the management will be taking a decision whether they need to go ahead or not. So that is and here the discovery phase role is ended actually. And now if the management feel like, okay, the results are coming out to be good, then that particular molecule development activities officially move into the next level, that is the preclinical development phase. So preclinical development phase, as I told you, it is a GLP directed phase. Basically, it is more stringent as compared to the discovery. So normally if we look into how the activity takes place, so whenever this type of things are happening, so because the information, the scientific information has to be transferred from one department to the another department. Possibly in the future, the previous department is not going to play any role into that. So how that transfer has to take place? So companies, industries basically, they adopt two methods, either of the two methods. First method is already existing discovery team. They ask the already existing discovery team to move for the preclinical stage. With the inclusion of some new team members, obviously during the preclinical phase, some more team members will be joining. But for example, they say like the chemists who are associated in the discovery phase, they will ask the same chemist team that okay, you will be a part of a preclinical team. That could be one strategy. The same person will be asked to continue the activity. The second strategy is that entirely new teams are dedicated for the preclinical development. So either of the technique they can use. So normally, if you look into the big pharmaceutical industries who are in this particular business, in the NDS product development and all, so what normally they do is they adopt the second strategy. They have a separate discovery team, they have a separate preclinical team, they have a separate clinical team. But maybe some of the small companies which are not having that much enough manpower and all, so maybe they can adopt the first strategy. So, but there is a pros and cons for both the strategies. For example, in the second approach, it allows the organization to separate the non-definitive, non-GLP study, that is the discovery phase, to the definitive GLP study, that is the preclinical phase. So that from the regulatory perspective, that segregation is there. So there will be a minimum issues from the regulatory side. But the drawback with this particular approach is that the complete transfer of knowledge and experience is not possible. Even if we can transfer all the documents, all the things, maybe maximum of the knowledge can be transferred, but the experience is not going to be transferred. So that is the cons associated with this approach. And to some extent, ownership is also lost, because if maybe it all depends on the nature of a person. So if we feel like, okay, this product, we had a role till this particular stage only, we doesn't have a role for the next level. So the ownership, which is always there for doing any particular task, is also lost in this particular activity. So these are the various approaches, and these are the pros and cons with these approaches. Now, the molecule has been moved to the preclinical phase. Now there is a need for a preclinical team to come and take up the responsibility. So already we have seen like chemists, pharmacologists, analysts, PK person, toxicologists, biopharmaceutics. So these are already there in the discovery phase. So again, they will be the representative from this department will be there in the preclinical study also, and some more team members will be adding into this. So what are those team members? Project team leader, because now things become more serious, the things have to move into the next level. So project team members, then regulatory affairs expert, then quality assurance people, because now everything is in the GLP environment. So Q has to play a very, very important role. Even regulatory team has to play a very important role, because all this data is going to be submitted to the US FDA, and everything has to be done in the GLP environment. So regulatory also look into that. Everything has to be done as per the expectation of the regulatory agencies. Then the clinical research department, clinical research, what they will be doing, I will tell you after this. And then the manufacturing scientists, they will be doing the scale up of the developed formulation, or either it's a drug substance or a drug product. And the marketing expert, they will continuously give their opinion on the development of a product. Now the thing is, it's a preclinical team. Why clinical research is needed? So if you recall, like after a few slides back only, I told you about the IND. In the IND, we need to submit three information. First is the data which is generated during the study. Second is the manufacturing information, and third one was the clinical protocol. So that is why there is a need for a clinical research expert at this particular stage only, so that he or she can participate in this entire activities, and based on the results which are coming out, they can prepare a protocols or the study plan for the clinical studies. So these are the team members which are going to play a role over here. So this is what I already discussed. So there is no need to repeat that. Another important task this preclinical development team is normally do is they basically prepare a plan, drug development plan actually. That is also called as drug development logic plan. So in this drug development logic plan, basically they assign the responsibilities to the each and every stakeholders. Like if you go back and look into this names actually, you can find like almost 12 key members are there. And apart from this, there will be other sub teams also, and there are more teams also. This is just an approximation. So responsibility, understanding the responsibility along with the timelines for each and every team member is very, very important to do the task on the expected to what is the task, that is the filing of the particular product. So basically, this drug development logic plan, there is a template for the preparation of the drug development logic plan actually. So this plan is basically prepared based on certain parameters that what purpose the drug has to be, the drug is developed. It is for the life-threatening disease or not, or for what is the type of a molecule, what is the therapeutic duration, like it is for acute or chronic, what will be the route of administration. So based on these, once the answer for these informations are available, then it is easy to prepare a drug development plan. Because suppose, for example, the route of administration is oral. So it means that for the manufacturing team, they will be having a clarity that everything has to be manufactured in the OSD plant, or oral solid plant, or oral liquid plant, what type of product it is. If the product is for IV administration, means the manufacturing team has an idea that everything has to be manufactured in the sterile facility. I believe all of you are aware of that. In the pharmaceutical manufacturing also, the plants are distributed. Like in one plant, if that is meant for the oral solid, in that particular line we cannot manufacture the sterile. For the sterile, we need a separate line or separate plant. So that type of segregations are always there in the manufacturing facility. So that is why that informations are also needed. For example, nowadays everybody is very keen on manufacturing amphotericin B liposome for the fungal infection treatment, but I think most of our intellectuals have forgot, or even they are not aware of that. Like amphotericin B is not a simple product; it's a liposomal amphotericin B. And for manufacturing of a liposomal amphotericin B, we need a specialized sterile manufacturing capabilities where liposomes can be prepared. And the another limitation with this particular product is, apart from the sterile manufacturing, we need a high capacity lyophilizers also. And if even everything is available, like manufacturing facility and the high capacity lyophilizer, we need a specialized lipid for the manufacturing. Amphotericin B liposome, HSPC, DSPG, cholesterol are used for the manufacturing. In India, there is no manufacturer who manufactures this HSPC, DSPG. There are only 2 or 3 manufacturers across the globe, Avanti and Lipoid and Gordon Pharma. They only manufacture these specialized lipids. Without these lipids, amphotericin B liposome cannot be manufactured, and these manufacturers already have their prior commitment to supply these lipids to their existing customers. So I don't know how the entire activity is going to take place in the defined time duration, but these are the things which are always supposed to be considered whenever really planning something effective. So drug development plan is put together with milestone achievements like IND submission, completion of phase 2, clinical trial, submission of NDA with appropriate timelines. So that is the reason we prepared this plan. So various stages, whether IND submission, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 completion, all those timelines can be established. That is why we normally heard that phase 2 is going to finish in August, phase 3 is going to start in September, phase 3 is going to finish in January. How those predictions basically comes? Those predictions come through this type of plans actually. Once we prepare this type of development plan. So once we are preparing this type of plans actually, so it is important to consider certain points also. Like for each and every individual who are the stakeholders, whether it's a clinician or it's a manufacturing scientist or it's a API manufacturer. So they are supposed to give their own responsibilities with the timeline by when they are going to complete the task. For example, if you say like, okay, the clinical testing has to be start from August. Clinical testing cannot be started if the clinical supplies are not there. Clinical supply means the product, the drug product which is supposed to be manufactured in the GMP facility. If the manufacturing team is not ready with that clinical supplies, how the clinical studies are going to start on time? So that is why all these processes are interrelated. Now, the product cannot be manufactured on time if the raw material is not available. So if the API team has not manufactured the drug substance on time, how DP can be prepared? So that is how preparation of DP at the larger scale, preparation of DP at the larger scale, then only clinical studies can be started. So that is how all these activities are clubbed together. Extensive teamwork is needed, obviously. Activities and timelines are interdependent as we discussed right now. Timelines also identify the critical path, the research studies which are rate limiting, and the department involved in it. So critical path means the stage or the activity which is going to consume the large amount of time, which is going to play an important role in completing the task. So in the entire, if we look into the drug development and approval process from the top, I will see like clinical studies are the critical path for any product development and filing process. Because drug product can be developed, it can be tested, but clinical studies are going to take the large amount of time and money into that. So that is why it could be a critical path. Then the patent life, that is also supposed to be considered, because what normally happens at the time of discovery phase only, when the manufacturer identify, okay, this particular molecule is going to work, so they file a patent application. So the patent application, that year or the month on which it is filed, from that application, it is going to sustain for 20 years only. And if the development team is going to take more time, for example, instead of 10 years, they are going to take they will take 15 years. So only 5 years are left for the innovator to generate the revenue out of it. So obviously it will not be a very cost-effective investment. Complete development plan with predetermined milestone and critical path is presented to the management, and then it is accepted by the management, and then the entire activity takes. One thing we need to consider is drug development plan is a living document, means it is always available for a change or modification as a result from the research studies. Any type of unexpected or negative data is supposed to be reported. And the status of the project is also supposed to be presented to the management at the regular interval. Now, the key objective of the preclinical study is to prepare IND and submit to FDA or other regulatory agencies for their approval and for the regulation and approval process, and then the clinical studies are supposed to. So, one of the important milestones while preparing this drug development plan is the IND application, which is basically coming after the preclinical study. So once this preclinical studies are done, then the clinical studies are started. So it is one of the most important and time-consuming and expensive phase. Okay. So it is created by expanding the preclinical team. Okay, with some new team members can also be added, and old team members can be removed or added. For example, there is no need of a chemist anymore in the clinical study, because all the molecule-related activities are done. Okay, maybe pharmacologists will be having a limited responsibility. Some new team members like clinicians, statisticians, they are going to be added into this. Okay, so we'll go through who are going to be, like physician is added, who is going to conduct all the study. Then clinical research person, they will be coordinating and reviewing all the protocols, reports, and etc. Then manufacturing team is going to provide the clinical supplies. So manufacturing team is basically comprised of the R&D also. Okay, so R&D and manufacturing work together. Then quality control team, they will be testing those clinical supplies. For example, in India, we are receiving the Sputnik V vaccine. So that Sputnik V vaccine is again tested in our labs actually. So DRL is facilitating that testing in collaboration. So then only it is released for the Indian market. Then a statistician is going to play an important role pre and post of the study, pre and post of the clinical study. Then clinical pharmacokinetics and the marketing person. So these are the team members which are going to play an important role during the clinical phase. Okay. So clinical development plan is updated with more emphasis on the clinical and manufacturing aspect. Apart from the clinical studies, there were parallel activities that is called as non-clinical studies, which can also run in parallel. If during the clinical studies, if some surprises are there, some observations are there, some studies are supposed to be done, that through the non-clinical means, through the preclinical means. So they are done in the non-clinical studies, which run in parallel with the clinical studies. So I will give you one case study on that, like when this non-clinical studies, what is the role, what could be the role of a non-clinical study, and why clinical studies is supposed to be very, very important. Even after doing the rigorous discovery and the preclinical phase, we can find a lot of surprises also. So there is one case study in which there was one drug candidate for anxiety. So during the phase 1 study, during the single dose study, it was carried out successfully and there was no issues observed. But when it comes for a multiple dose study, when the same molecule has given for the multiple times, then during the bioanalytical testing, it was identified that there is a new metabolite which is there. And the PK testing of that metabolite has shown that this metabolite is having a half-life of 7 days actually. So, and it get accumulated into a body after the multiple administration. So, this is a new thing, but like because this metabolite was not observed during the preclinical or even during the phase 1 single dose study, and that metabolite itself is having some good amount of half-life and it get accumulated. So, it is now become important before moving to the next table to understand the pharmacology and toxicology of that particular metabolite. So that metabolite is basically moved to a non-clinical study actually. During the non-clinical study, pharmacological testing shows that the metabolite has a biological activity same as of parent compound. And because of accumulation, it is efficacious at the lower dose. The for toxicological evaluation says like this molecule is having a similar toxicity profile or even better better therapeutic profile than the parent compound actually. And the PK study shows that the metabolite has the acceptable level of bioavailability. So these studies were done in parallel or in the non-clinical studies on the animals using the some in vitro in vivo models. So while going through this entire observation, it was concluded that the metabolite is better candidate than a parent compound. And after doing some major proper preclinical studies to understand more about the toxicity of that particular molecule, that molecule is officially introduced for the clinical studies with the possibility of better chances for getting an approval than the parent compound. So this type of cases are also happens during the clinical study. So if I like to summarize this clinical study, so all the studies are appropriately documented in the clinical report. When it is done, it is submitted in the form of NDA. That NDA is basically based on the CTD common technical document, which is basically some sort of guidance to prepare a dossier, and it is submitted to the FDA. And after submission, the RA department interacts with the regulatory agencies for any query or any response. And as for FDA queries, project team design and conduct necessary research study to support the submission. And after successful approval of a clinical drug product, team coordinate again for successful launch of a drug product, and then there is a time for a party. Okay, so this was all about the new drug development and approval process. We'll move into the next, we'll move into the second part of our discussion. That is a smaller one. It is not as big as we discussed right now. So please bear with me for next 10-15 minutes more. So in this particular part, we will discuss about the drug application filing process. I know the lunch was very high before that. 3 hours of discussion, and again 1 hour of bombarding of this regulatory thing and all will not be very convenient for you guys, but still please bear with me for next 10-15 minutes. So drug application filing process. So in this particular part, we'll go through the various filing, various regulatory agencies, like what is the requirement for FDA, what is the requirement for EMA, what is the requirement for Japan, what is the requirement for Canada. We'll go through all this. Okay. What is ANDA filing, what is NDA filing, all those information. So as I've already given a lot of background on US FDA, it is very good agency, this, that, and all. Actually, that is truth also. Okay, so US basically evolved from no regulations in 18th century to one of the highly admired favorite regulatory authority in the world. This is not my statement. This I basically borrowed from them. Okay, so it is one of the highly admired favorite regulatory authority in the world. The reason for that is, first thing is they are very stringent with their requirement. Second thing, wherever needed, they become flexible also. So I told two sentences which are contradictory. First is stringent, second is flexible. The thing is, they are stringent, but if being a sponsor, I am able to justify something within the purview of a science, so they become flexible also. Okay, so that is the quality they are having. And the other important thing is most of their guidelines, policies are very, very clear to the applicants. They're relatively transparent as compared to the other regulatory agencies, because they are having all their databases, drugs at FDA, Orange Book. You can find all inactive ingredient database from where you can get information on the inactive ingredient. So all those type of informations are available. Just with the single click, we can get all the information. Okay, so those type of informations are available. Now coming to the US FDA, so basically US FDA is having various divisions, various centers. Like they're having 6 product centers. Among the 6 product centers, there are 2 centers. First is CDER, that is Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. Second is the CBER, Center for Biological Evaluation and Research. So these 2 centers are responsible for giving an approval. So CDER is responsible for giving an approval for the small molecules or some of the peptides also. And CBER is responsible for giving an approval for antibodies, vaccines, biological products. So this is basically how this FDA basically looks like. They keep on updating this particular chart after every 4 or 5 months. So this is the, I believe this is the latest one, December 2020 only. So if you'll see here, so these are the 2 divisions, Center for Center for Biological Evolution and Research, and Center for Drug, CEDAR and CBER. Okay. And apart from this, there is other center for devices, Center for Food Safety, Center for Tobacco, Center for Veterinary. And apart from there is a center, there is a division called Oncology Center of Excellence, which provide guidance to the industry sometime on the oncology product. And then there is a division called Office of Regulatory Affairs, basically which is responsible for providing the guidance on the regulatory sides. Now, coming to the drug application process in US FDA. So basically in US FDA, the applications are submitted in three forms. First is NDA, that is the new drug application that we discussed in the previous, for last 1 hour we discussing about the NDA only. Then another one is a supplemental NDA. If we have to make some changes in the existing NDA application, then it can be done through supplemental NDA, and they are also called as 505 B2 applications. And the third one is abbreviated new drug application. Abbreviated new drug application means ANDA, which is also called as generic, and they are also called as 505J. So as per FDC Act, paragraph number 505, all the information are provided for the NDA, supplemental NDA and abbreviated NDA. So in that particular act, in the paragraph number 5, point number 505 and paragraph number B1, paragraph B1 is responsible for NDA. That is why it is called as 505 B1 application. NDA is called as 505 B1 application. The information for the supplemental application is provided in subpart, that is 505 B2, in the second part of the paragraph number B. Same is the case with the NDA also. So in paragraph number J, basically under this section 505, the information for the NDA is there. That is why they are called as 505J, 505J. So I believe that segregation, maybe some of you are already aware of. So those who are not aware of, for them, it would be clear now. So 505 B1, 505 B2, 505 J. Okay, so when it comes for a submission for NDA application, as we discussed, we need to provide all the information, discovery phase, preclinical, clinical, everything has to be provided for 505 B1. In case of 505 B2, since it's a supplemental application, as I told you, for example, I got an approval for lung cancer. Now I need to submit an application for the breast cancer. So I'm not supposed to do the entire study again. I will be doing some of the major studies which can demonstrate the safety and efficacy of my product for that particular indication. So in that case, partial clinical data would be needed. In case of ANDA application, they are called as a generic application. Generic application, there is no need to do any clinical study. Please remember, there is no need to do any clinical study except bioequivalence study. So there are no need to do any other clinical study, no efficacy study, no safety study, nothing. Only bioequivalence study are needed. Bioequivalence study means just we will be testing our developed formulation, the generic formulation with the innovator formulation on the human volunteers. And we'll simply take the blood samples and we'll simply analyze, and we'll see the rate and extent of our generic formulation should be equivalent to the innovator product or the NDA product. That study is only needed in case of ANDA application. Para 1, Para 2, Para 3, Para 4 filing. Para 1, Para 2, Para 3, Para 4 filing. What are those? Para 1 filing, there is a database for the US FDA that in which we can find all the information, whatever the product is approved or is existing in the US FDA. So that database is called as Orange Book. So Para 1 filing is basically meant for the product which are not having any patent information on the Orange Book. Means there was no patent existing for that particular product. So maybe a lot of very, very old product, we can say if those type of products are there and I need to develop a generic product, then I will be going through a Para 1 strategy. Now Para 2 strategies, there were some patents were there, but they are now expired. For example, if I need to develop paracetamol tablet and the patent was expired now, so I will be going through Para 2 filing. Para 3 filing means the patent and exclusivity are lying. There is one more other term with the US FDA called as exclusivity. That is the exclusive right given to the innovator apart from the patent time duration. Okay. So if that patent or exclusivity are still valid in that particular case, and if I need to make a same generic formulation, so I can do that. I can make the generic formulation. I can file that particular product also. But I will be getting a tentative approval under this Para 3 filing with a commitment that once this patent and exclusivities are expired, then only I will be able to market my product. That is called as para 3 filing. Para 3 filing means the patent and exclusivities are still valid, and I can only market the product after the expiration of patent and exclusivity. I can file the product before also. I can get an approval before also, but I can only get an approval after the. Sorry, I can only market the product after the expiration of a patent and exclusivity. That is para 3 filing. Para 4 filing is basically, maybe many of you might have heard about para 4 filing. So it is something to bring some innovation, to bring some flavor of scientific activities in the generic industry also. So US FDA came out with this para 4 filing strategy. In the para 4 filing strategy, the generic product can come out with some innovations in the in the already existing product, okay, by coming out with some new type of product also, or by invalidating the existing patent also of the innovator product. And while doing so, they can get the exclusive marketing authorization of their generic product along with the innovator product. So they can generate large amount of revenue. Before the expiration of a patent and exclusivity, they will be given 6 months of exclusivity with the innovator product. Like for the next 6 months, no more generic filer is supposed to be get an approval into that. That is what the para 4 filing is all about. So if any one of you are really interested in knowing the para 4 filing, for this flowchart is there. So para 4 filing, what normally we do, a sponsor submit the ANDA application to the FDA. Notification is sent to the NDA patent holder, like because if I'm submitting a para 4 application, obviously it's a generic one. So the innovator who has already existing that particular product, they will be getting that notification from the FDA. And if NDA patent holder is not taking any action on this part for next within 45 days, then ANDA application is reviews will be started by the FDA. In case if NDA patent holder is taking an action, which is like 99% of the cases it happens actually. So in that case, FDA will suspend the approval of NDA until the entire thing has to be decided by the court. That is called as litigation activity or infringement activity. So the innovator product can put a infringement suit on the NDA filer actually, and then everything has to be settled on the court only. If court decision goes in favor of NDA patent holder, FDA suspend the approval till the expiry of a patent for the ANDA product. And if court decision goes in favor of ANDA filer, FDA proceed for granting an approval for that para 4 file. So this was about the US. So we'll move into this Europe thing. So in the Europe, basically, as I told you, EMA is the major agency, that is EMA. Sometimes we also call it as the EMA, European Medicine Agency, basically. So they do the filing based on the filing can be done in the Europe by the various means. First is the centralized filing. So there are certain products like biotechnological products or the products which are meant for the AIDS, cancer, diabetes, neurodegenerative disorder, autoimmune disorder, viral diseases, or even the orphan drugs. For this type of drugs, actually centralized procedure is the only way by which the sponsor has to do. Like they have to go only with a single application. That application will be reviewed by EMA, and the approval will be given for all the countries, for marketing in all the countries which are associated with EMA. Another one that is a centralized procedure is a single application, single evaluation and single authorization, and to market more than 30 countries. Another way of filing in the Europe is national authorization. In the member states are responsible, like we can have to reach to the, suppose for example, if I want to only launch my product in Germany, so I will be reaching out to German medicine regulatory agencies, and I will be submitting an application. That is called as national authorization. Another would be decentralized procedure. In the decentralized procedure, for example, if I feel like I need to market the product only 4 or 5 countries, not all the 30 countries. So what I will do, I will, for example, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, Austria, I need to market. So I will select any of the one country, and that will be that country will be given as a reference member. That regulatory agency will be given a reference member state tag, and that will review my application. And other will also look into the entire review. Other regulatory agencies will also look into the review process for which I am going to launch the product, and accordingly the approval is granted. Another route is mutual recognition procedure, in which already my product is approved with one country and with one regulatory agency. Everything is done, so I can file through this mutual recognition procedure also. So if I got an approval in Germany, I need to file for the Italy. So I will be filing with the Italy through this MRP route, and this Italy will coordinate with the German regulatory agencies, and accordingly they can give an approval if they find everything correct. Coming to the other countries filing procedure, so Japan is almost same as USA. So instead of NDA and ANDA, they call it as a JNDA and JANDA. There is an agency called PMDA, which basically takes care of the entire approval process in the Japan actually. Okay. And one thing which is there for Japan is basically Japan is very, very stringent. It is more stringent than the US FDA with respect to the compliance. So it is not easy to get an approval with the Japan. Canada is almost similar like USA actually. So they also call it as an NDS instead of NDA, new drug submission, and ANDS, abbreviated new drug submission. And majority of the agenda is similar for the Canada also as for the USA. So basically they look into the safety and efficacy of our product. So possibly I reached to the end of my discussion, and if I'll try to recall whatever we have learned so far in last 1 hour 20 minutes actually. So what are the key learnings? So we have gone through what is regulatory affairs, the application and necessity. What is RA organization structure? What are the component of a regulatory filing we have gone through? Regulatory affairs agencies and how they differ. We have gone through the overview of drug development and approval process, the various stages of drug product development, roles and responsibility of each scientific discipline we have gone through, whether it's a formulator or it's a manufacturer or it's a chemist or it's a pharmacologist or it's a marketing person. We have gone through the responsibility of each and everyone. Then US FDA structure we have gone through, the filing procedures including the para 4 filing, and then the impact of patent and exclusivity on marketing generic product, that is through the para 4 filing we have gone through, and other regulatory agencies also. These are the key websites. If you, any one of you really interested in US FDA, Europe, ICH, USPTO, these are the websites which are basically work together for the product approval in the regulated market. So actually I am located in Bitsnai, so this is how my campus looks like. This is the old picture. You can find more multi-story buildings over here. So basically this is my old team, I will say, because of the corona thing we are not able to get a picture of my team. This is my lab, and I'm handling some of the research projects also related to the novel nanoparticulate carrier system, liposomes and nanoparticles. And apart from this, I am also dealing with industrial projects also, some 505(b)(2) type of formulations or some viability enhancement type of projects. So this is what I'm doing. So thank you all. If time permits, then you can ask the questions also, and thank you.
Participants are requested to post the queries in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and pose a question to the expert speaker so that he can able to deliver on your answers to the questions. Anybody can unmute your mic and you can pose a question. You are invited.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, Devan, go ahead.
Sir, I have a question that you told that, and we all know that about the every new drug comes to in the market takes more than 10 years. But in this pandemic season, the vaccine should take only within 1 year they came in markets.
Mm-hmm.
But if the vaccines approved for emergency use in the 1 year, but many of the drugs are shows their side effects after many years, approximate 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. If the vaccine in future after 1 or 2 years, if the vaccine shows side effects, then it is considered as a failure of science?
No, because science is not about getting always everything right actually.
Yes,
okay, science is not about getting everything right. Okay, science is the exploration. We are exploring. So getting a success or a failure, that is the difficulty actually in the current scenario, was that during this stage only we think like science is all about getting a success only. Okay,
yes.
So it is not a failure. Because of the science only, somehow we are able to tackle up this pandemic situation. So
yes.
There could be a lot of negatives actually. You are absolutely right. We can get some side effect after 2-3 years. Not only after 2-3 years, we can get a side effect after 15-20 years also. Ranitidine recently, like last year only, we came across some of the potent impurities in the ranitidine, which undergoes the entire approval process of 10-15 years. Still, some new impurities came in. So what was that? That was the only thing. So in those cases, we can get like lot of COX inhibitor, COX2 inhibitors. I'm not very sure that you are aware of. At a certain stage, we are having molecules called COX2 inhibitors, which are celecoxib, valdecoxib, doxacoxib. A lot of companies like Roche and all, after getting an approval, after doing the entire studies for 10, 15 years, their products are withdrawn from the market because of serious side effects, including the cardiotoxicity, which were found after the approval of a product. So those type of activities keep on happening actually. Coming to this vaccine product development and approval process. So yes, 1 year is very short, but the thing is, as I told you, that FDA take 1 year of time for the review of the application. But in this particular case, FDA put up everything on. They were on the toes. They bring everyone together. They kept everything aside, and they completely dedicated on reviewing the application. The application is also something that, as I told you, like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 data is collected and then it is submitted. In this particular case, the data is submitted, possibly it is submitted on the rollover basis. As soon as the studies are done, they are submitted. As soon as done, they are submitted. And they keep on reviewing. So everybody is on the toes while giving an approval. Nobody want to do anything against the mankind actually. Everybody is looking for a solution right now. So saying like that vaccine is going to have a side effect after 2 years, 3 years, it's just a vague prediction only, because we can find negatives from anything.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other participants? I hope we don't have any more questions right now, sir. And in chat box also, I didn't find any questions actually. And what is the status? I just am personally thinking, asking you that what is the status of Covaxin right now? Actually, it was not completely done with phase 3, and as of an emergency basis, the CDSCO has given an approval, and now we are in a crisscross situation that who just
No. It is not something like it. They have not done phase 3. They have started the phase 3. And the data, whatever is coming, it's a limited data only. Okay. So as I told you, like clinical study is going to take 6 years of time or 5 years of time. Actually. There is a reason for that. Like there are a lot of investigations which need time. For example, there are some chronic toxicities also, which are some chronic toxicological studies are also which are supposed to be done for 1 year, 2 years. So obviously those studies we cannot do it in 1 or 2 months. So whatever is possible, whatever the limited data right now, that data is positive actually. Okay. So the thing which is going to take a time, obviously it is going to take a time. But the approval is given on a proper scientific, rational, scientific outcome only, and obviously on the basis of the projections. For example, I will give you one small example. Like in case of generic product development and approval, we submit the application after 6 months of stability data. So at the 6 months, we will normally do an accelerated study and we'll do the real time study. So accelerated study means, for example, my product is stable at room temperature. So I will be keeping my product at 40 degree also. That is called as the accelerated study test. And that testing I am doing for 6 months only. Because at the product which is having a shelf life of 2 years, the data is submitted only for 6 months. With the projection that from the accelerated stability study, we plot all those RNA sequestration and all, we plot that, okay, this is what will happen. So we are doing that thing from last many years. RNA sequestration is what? That is a projection only, based on some scientific ground only we are doing it. This type of activities are not done regularly for the clinical studies, because clinical studies we can find more exceptions. But right now we doesn't have an option. So that is why we are projecting like that only.
Hoping for the best from Covaxin restrictions. And what are the regulated? Yeah, sir, we have another question from Abdul.
I will read that.
Yeah.
If patent is granted, which is valid for how many years as per the new regulation? It is 20 years. So 20 years means the day I am filing an application. So it will be valid for example, if I file an application now today, 2021. So it will be valid up to 41 only. So again, the application filing to approval process of that particular patent, again, it will take 4 or 5 years, even higher also, even lower also. But the patent date will be counted from the day of filing actually. That is also called as priority date. So it will be 20 years. Now, there is one provision with good regulatory agencies like US, Europe, and all. What normally they do is, if they find that the approval, development and approval process of the innovator product has to expend exceptionally additional time, like 15, 16 years. So just to manage the cost which is coming out from the entire development, they can extend the patent term for that particular product for 5 more years. So those type of flexibilities are also. So Charita ma'am, you are mute, right? You are on mute.
Yeah, sorry, sir. Any more questions from the participants? I think no, sir.
Excuse me, sir.
There is no questions. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Abdul
Mr.
Rahman, sir.
Sir, actually, in herbal formulation, is there any guidelines, sir? So regarding the patents,
Okay, can you repeat?
regarding the herbal or Ayurvedic formulations,
Uh-huh.
actually we are filing to Ayushna, sir.
Mhm.
So is there any guidelines for number of years applicability for this, sir?
I believe normally it is 20 years only across the globe. So for better clarity, you can reach out to IPO, Indian Patent Office also, and BPO also, like for which market you would be targeting actually. So if you're targeting for India, so just reach out to IPO. I believe it will be for 20 years. The important point is what I will suggest to you is if you're having that concept ready with you right now with some minimum data, just get the priority date, file it immediately. Why I'm saying that thing, because in case suppose if we file today and the similar type of concept has been filed yesterday, so later on at the time of once they will be giving you an approval, they will consider the previous application, the application which is filed before of the similar type of concept. So if you had an idea, just file it immediately, whether it's a formulation or it's a API or whatever it is.
Okay, sir.
50 drugs wrong, so where we went wrong. Okay. So actually, this type of figures, I never like this type of figures, like only one side. I always like a relative figure, like how many drugs were there and how many were withdrawn actually. That will be the real picture. So 250 drugs withdrawn from a market is like it is just like information normally we get in the news channels actually. So it should be relative one. Out of how many drugs 250 were withdrawn. So whenever we are doing science, so this type of, as I told you, like science is not always about getting it. People used to do the things, okay, sometimes it went right, sometimes it went wrong also. But the reality is like in many cases, it is found that maximally people get benefit from this, but especially in the pharmaceutical domain. People are getting benefit. I've seen many cases, even in the current scenario also, because of the vaccine. I've seen the houses where the parents who are having a comorbidities, and they got both the doses of vaccine, whether Covishield or Covaxin. And in the same house, their son, who is 35, 40 years old, he got COVID. And their parents are basically taking care of him, but they are not got any type of infection because they got the vaccines on the time. So that what was that actually? That thing is something saved their life. Actually. This is what felt to me actually. So even not looking into the negatives, we have to look from the positive perspective. Now coming back to your question, what went wrong? So that is something. If it is from the positive perspective, so we need to learn from the mistakes. We need to learn. That is what nowadays what is happening is, suppose I have given you the example of COX-2 inhibitors, like they found to be cardiotoxic. So because of which what happened, ICH basically publishes a guideline on the safety. I forgot the number of ICH guideline actually. So ICH has published the guideline on the safety part. ICH is having 4 type of guidelines: quality, safety, efficacy, and multidiscipline. So ICH is having a safety guideline in which they have included this cardiotoxicity also, that in case if we are developing a product, we need to do this cardiotoxicity studies also. That all came because of those reasons only. On the regular interval, these type of guidances are adding into a system. The regulatory agencies are also trying to refine their activities on the regular. And Second thing is, if you look into any good regulatory agencies, always they give an approval based on two things. First is the safety, second is the efficacy. They always say safety and efficacy. They never say efficacy and safety. So that depict their priority on the safety part, not on the efficacy. So the approvals are normally given first on the safety thing. If the product is safe, then only they look into the efficacy. So this type of things basically has been learned from the past, from the mistakes possibly. I will not say mistakes, I will say some level of hurry method. Can you guide me what is the qualification required for getting job in clinical trial department and what is the criteria? Maybe Devang, we can discuss this thing on one-on-one. You can just drop me a mail and I will answer that. Yeah, but to maybe to summarize the things, so if you want to work in the clinical trial department, first of all, it will be better if you can do your M.Pharm in pharmacology. It will be really good, and you can do some courses on biostatistics as a biostatistician or some clinical data management thing, and also those type of things are really needed. Or some, I think some diploma or some those type of certification programs are also there for the clinical trial.
Sir, excuse me, sir. One more small question, sir.
Yes, yes.
Sir, if we can design and develop any medical apps, healthcare related apps, is there any so filing patents like that? Is there,
patent we can file for anything. Patent is a technology. It is not a pharmaceutical. Patent has nothing to do with the pharmaceutical. So you can file patent for anything. So obviously it can be done. It can be done. Not an
there is a need of filing a patent, or directly we can introduce
basically apps. Patent is filed on the basis of obviousness. If your science, if your research is obvious, like it is just inspired from some existing research, there is no need to file a patent, and even you will not be granted a patent also. Yeah, but if you feel like it is a very innovative thing, whatever I'm doing right now, nobody has done so far, so it is always better to do a patent. Otherwise, the night you will sleep, next day you will find a similar type of application in the market.
Yes.
So it is always better.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I think we had a good discussions actually. Any more queries from the participants? The last one.
Some more question? There is no comment in the comment box. Thank you.
Yes, sir. There is no box. And sir, your presentation truly symbolizes the soundness of knowledge you have in the regulatory affairs. And when we discussed, actually, I just very clear. I'm just insisting you to give any kind of a topic on the advanced systems in drug development, actually. But now I understood that why you insisted to made your presentation on regulatory affairs.
Immediately, I can give a discussion on liposomes or nanoparticles. That I can do it right now only. For next 1 hour, I can speak on liposomes. I can speak on complex injectable products also. But I believe those type of discussions are full in the internet. Everywhere people are having those type of discussions. So it will not be that much useful.
Yeah, probably your idea is very perfect and worked out well today, actually. Driven us in some different area. Thank you for your insights in regulatory affairs and also the various stages of drug development. So very truly impressed with your session. And I take this opportunity to share a certificate of appreciation from the management and the principal side for delivering a beautiful lecture on regulatory considerations for developing and filing of new drug products. So kindly accept it virtually, and I'll be taking a couple of weeks time to deliver as a hard copy to your postal address once the lockdown is lifted. So kindly accept it, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for joining on this day. And request from my side, like when you all visit help from us, just can you extend your heartfelt support to the caller from me.
Yeah, like right now we are connected, so maybe in future if anything is needed, I will be able.
Yes, we are connected, and yeah, the line should go, sir. That's what I'm expecting from you. Knowledge should be interchanged so that the community will grow very well.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
and
definitely.
very sorry,
So,
sir.
reaching out to
one
me,
small
reaching
personal
out to
question
me
I'm
is
asking, and yeah, you get
yep, please, please. Ma'am, your voice is actually
yeah.
disconnecting.
Maybe
I'm not able to
maybe
hear
you will
you.
get angry for that, but don't scold me, please. And what is the reason that? Yeah, I'm audible
Yes, ma'am, you are audible, but I'm getting some disruption in the voice.
now?
I'm not sure whether this is for me or for everyone.
Okay, maybe some
Okay.
poor connectivity, sir. And one my question is actually, what is the reason for taking a switch over from the industry to academics?
This is
That's one question.
174 times, like you were the 174th person who asked this question. I'm just joking. Okay.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I went across this question multiple times, like many people, including my previous bosses, also they asked. So the thing is, I was working in industry, it was doing good. Actually, my last industrial assignment was as a senior manager. I was a group leader for liposomal type of product development in Amneal Pharmaceuticals. Everything was going good actually, but I was thinking of expanding my maybe my because in the industry to some extent we are bound to do some specific job only. So I just want to come out from that. And second thing is I felt like there is a need to educate the budding scientist also to many extent at this level only. So I thought of coming to academics, doing teaching or educate or training the people, training the students, and doing my own research. And to some extent, I'm doing it right now. Both the things. Basically I came out. I also designed some new subjects in which actually whether it's a parental product development or pharmaceutical management or quality assurance and regulatory affairs. So these type of subjects basically I'm teaching over here. And till now the students are quite satisfied with the things what I got a feedback from them. I'm not sure because normally students always say good in those cases, but the similar type of feedback we got from our industries also who are regularly come for a recruitment of our like Pfizer and all, they also appreciated the knowledge the students are getting in regulatory affairs and all. That is good. So when I go through all those type of mails, I really feel satisfied that okay, my decision was not bad.
Yeah, hope so. Your objective and purpose should be and must be served in the future days. I'm expecting.
Till now, it is going fine. Let's see in the future what is going to happen. So, just one question from my side. Like one question from my side. So, the audience are the faculties or the students?
No, everybody of faculty, sir.
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah.
Everybody of faculty.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Normally, it's a IICT program. So, thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for joining, sir.
Actually, the idea behind this discussion was also like this only because right now, with the PCI everywhere, they want us to teach regulatory affairs. But because of the, obviously, it is not easy for the pure academicians to teach the regulatory affairs actually in a effective way. I can understand the limitation. Whatever I am discussing right now, that all because of 8-10 years of experience I spent in industry. But PCI has came out with that type of requirement, and forcefully many people need to do that. Many times people do it in a good manner also. Many times they leave everything on the head of the students also. So the idea behind having this type of discussion is to some extent trigger the budding faculties also to do the things in a better way. Maybe if I'm able to give a spark to 2 or 3 of the faculties, it will be really good. I believe my part is done.
Yes,
so that's all from my side.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Namaste. Have a stay safe and have a nice day. Thank you. Okay, sir. The participants are requested to find your feedback link in the WhatsApp group, and tomorrow we'll be joining at 9 a.m. And tomorrow I'm just sure that we have a very good sessions by Dr. Gaurav Jain from DIPSER and Dr. Rohan Pai again from DIPSER and Dr. Vinay Ladar from Amity University. So don't miss this opportunity to listen all the wonderful lectures, and thank you all for joining on this platform. Stay safe and thank you so much. Bye.